Hi, everybody. Welcome to. What the hell are you doing?
Oh, sure. I'm messing with my microphone.
We've been in here for 15 minutes pre-show, and you're all right.
I just don't like the way I sound sometimes.
I don't
I'm
like the way you sound
self-conscious.
anytime, but we're gonna move on. It's Jacob Morley, everybody. You can find him on Twitter at Jacob Morley. You can find me. I'm at Jacob Westendorf. Check out the Green Bay Draft Guide. Check it on the bottom there. You could go just Google Gum Road and then Green Bay Packers, and you'll find that bad boy for $8.99. Tonight we're going to be talking about tight ends, and this is a rescheduled show, sort of, because the time we were supposed to do the tight end show, Aaron Rodgers went on Pat McAfee's show and told the world that he was not going to play for the Packers anymore and became didn't officially become a New York Jet, but he's going to be a New York Jet at some point or another.
And good thing we have so much more information about that situation since he did that too. Like, thank God.
I can't tell if that's sarcasm or not, but
That was sarcasm.
Yeah. I do want to briefly go over some of the things that were touched on this week at the owners' meetings. Matt LaFleur gave Rodgers a send off. Basically, said he appreciated him, the love that in everything he gave to the organization. Kind of took the high road on answering some of the questions. Kind of deferred to Brian Gutekunst on saying that was his decision or whatever. Shout out Rick, 2 a.m. in Sweden. Shout out to you, my friend. Appreciate
Go to
you.
bed.
Yeah, no kidding. If not, Morley's boring ass will put you to sleep here in just a few minutes.
That's probably. Let's be real. That's why he can't sleep. He just can't sleep, and he wants the sultry tones of our voices, the ASMR, which we already went over. That's not me because my microphone's weird.
So let's get to it here. The other thing that I did want to talk about with LaFleur's comments, he said temper your expectations for Jordan Love. People made a big deal out of that, but it's just like, of course, that's the answer. Like, what is he supposed to say? Nope, he's going to be the league MVP. We're going 13-4 and going to the Super Bowl. Like, no, he's protecting his quarterback. I don't think there's much to say on that. I feel like if you want to make that into an anti-Jordan Love thing, you certainly can. But that would be, I think you're stretching the truth when you're doing that. Like,
was that unprompted that he said that?
No, they had asked him about transitioning. They had asked him a question. Okay. I mean, LaFleur said he wasn't answering questions about Rodgers, but he said stuff about Love.
It would be weird if he opened it with that, like, oh, hey,
he didn't open. Yeah, he didn't open with that. And then he later said that he liked his poise and that's the step he took and how Tom Clements has been big for him. And just like, it was a positive interview. He's just protecting his quarterback. And you're going to hear some variation of temper your expectations for the next 6 months. And Matt LaFleur.
It's going to, I mean, we're old enough to live, and most of us probably are old enough to have lived through the transition from Favre to Rodgers. That was pre-Twitter, pre-stream of consciousness out in the interwebs. We lived and died on every throw Aaron Rodgers made for the first 8-10 games of that season because you just don't know. You didn't know if he was going to be good. It's going to get weird. It's going to get weird with Jordan Love. I mean, it's going to be a quarter by quarter thing with how we're feeling about this.
Series by series.
Probably so. Throw by throw. Yeah.
Yeah. I've gone over a couple things with some people. My take on it is I've said this before, the range of outcomes for this season. They could go 3-14 and fire everybody, and they could be 12-5 and in the playoffs. It really does. It depends on the quarterback. One thing I do want to push on a little bit is my Twitter feed got into a bit of an argument with me when I said, if Love stinks and the team goes 3-14, number one, everybody is probably getting fired and should be. And somebody said, well, Matt LaFleur will be 50. Andrew Mertig, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm subtweeting him. I just don't agree. And he's good. He's smart. We just don't agree on this particular topic. He said, Matt LaFleur will be 50-33. And you can't fire him for that. To which my argument is, if you go 3-14 with your preferred starting quarterback, you could fire anybody. And that includes Jordan Love too. Like, I don't think Jordan Love is, quote, guaranteed 2 seasons. The only thing would be, I like the way my guy Mike Kawano put it, was if they're 3-14, they might bring Love back next season, but it's as a placeholder. Like, you're here as a quote unquote veteran that'll start until we decide Caleb Williams is ready or to be Caleb's backup. Because we already picked up your 5th-year option. Like, we already made that decision a year ago, and you made us look really bad you made the previous regime look really bad while doing it. But if they do that, if that happens, somebody else very, very well could be picking Caleb Williams, and somebody else could be coaching him. But that's not what I wanted to bring up.
And that's not what's going to happen. He's going to be great.
I don't think Love's going to be great, but I don't think he's going to go 3-14 either. So
I think he's going to be great.
Well,
Great to good. That's my range of outcome.
Great to good. Okay, well, we'll see. I mean, it's tough for first year quarterbacks to win. I'm at the point where it's his first year starting.
Fourth year. He's ready.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
is,
But I want that bookmark though, because then when he makes a mistake, you can't say, well, it's just his first year.
Fourth year in the system, first year as a starter. It's different than a rookie. It is different. It's like in the middle somewhere.
But the article Bill Huber wrote was first year starters, not rookies. Now, granted, a majority of those were rookies, but like, I do think there are going to be games the Packers lose, and they'll lose because the quarterback isn't as good or isn't as experienced and makes plays that he shouldn't have, or just whatever.
I mean, they went what 7-9 what were they 8-9 last year with like the 27th DVOA quarterback. So he just got to be better than that.
Which maybe he is, maybe he's not. I don't know. I know nothing about Jordan Love.
Just a hater. You're just a hater. I can't wait to expose the DMs and all the screenshots. Why do you think I talked to you these last 3 years, Jacob? Why do you think I've continued to talk to you? Just to take screenshots of your Jordan Love takes.
I figured it was because we were friends, but okay, you're using me for your
wrong.
No, well, I will let you know I do not have screenshots of your takes for if he stinks that I would expose. Mostly because if he stinks, then we're just both going to be sad. So
it could happen. Like Ross said the other day at Ross Uglum, he's like, there's like a 30% chance he just turns the ball over a crap ton, and I can't disagree with that. Like if you want to point out to like, hey, this is where he's going to struggle. He does like to play a little bit of YOLO ball, so can't deny it.
And I'm not going to be overly upset about that necessarily because, again, the adjustment for the entire fan base is going to be that no player ever has turned the ball over less than Love's predecessor. But this is not a Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers podcast. I do just want to talk very briefly about Brian Gutekunst's comments regarding Aaron Rodgers and how that whole situation went down. So essentially, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit because I don't have the exact quotes in front of me, but Gutekunst's timeline is that they had a conversation after the season was over and said they look forward to more conversations. And then Allen Lazard, this is another thing to point out as good, because if you want to pick which side to take, this is part of it I think you need to know. Allen Lazard has said it's hard to reach Rodgers in the offseason because he just doesn't answer you one way or the other. It's not a personal thing. It's not a I don't like you thing. It's one way or the other. So Gutekunst said we couldn't reach out to him or we couldn't get a hold of him. We tried to have these conversations with him to just tell him, essentially what direction they wanted to go. And then he said, when Aaron couldn't answer, we had to make a decision. Gutekunst said I had to do my job. And then his representatives being Rodgers representatives told Gutekunst that they would like to be traded to the Jets. So it wasn't even Rodgers that had that. Yeah, it wasn't even.
I think everything Goody said is layered.
I think that
had to talk to his representatives. I had to do my job. Like I go back to Rodgers saying, I want to be involved in decisions that directly affect my job. Brian Gutekunst had to do my job. Like I think this stuff, it's a back and forth with two pretty smart dudes that are petty.
Yeah, and there's definitely some venom in those words. And I don't necessarily, Gutekunst has taken the high road on basically everything for the last 3 years. And I do think that here's the thing. I get labeled as the 12 haters / front office shill, whatever you want to call it. But my thing is, I think both sides are at fault here. Obviously, Brian Gutekunst could have better handled the selection of Jordan Love. He has basically said as much in the past that he would do that differently if he could. That being said, I don't know. He says he would. I'm taking him at his word. Maybe not. But I also think that and I've said this before, the only thing I think that would have done is made Rodgers mad 20 minutes sooner. And he would have just like the bottom line is the parentheses. They drafted my replacement. Rodgers says that all the time. All the time. He's talking about they drafted my replacement. And he basically opened his Pat McAfee show with they drafted my replacement. Then you got all this stuff about, yesterday we're talking about Jordy Nelson again for whatever reason. And then, I think what it boils down to is Rodgers, over the years, never thought that he would be the one that they were letting go of a year early instead of a year late. Like, I think he thought he was above that and earned above that, whatever you want to, whatever I don't think he thought, well, I do think he thought he was above the team to some degree, but I don't think he just thought it would ever happen to him. And then when it did, he was upset about it. Now, I don't think this outcome here was always a set outcome. Like, I don't think the Packers had their mind made up about this. I do think if Rodgers tells them in that first meeting, hey guys, I don't need to take time to make a decision. I'm all in. I'm coming back. Then they said, okay. I think they say, okay, you're the guy. And Jordan Love is never the preferred starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, I think is what happened. But since it worked out this way, maybe they had a leaning of wanting to pivot towards Jordan Love, but I don't have this, the people that are fully on Rodgers' side is they're saying it like the Packers had this evil plot to always go to Jordan Love. They have to find out what he is. And like, I don't think they do. I think they were willing to admit, hey, we made a mistake. We drafted a quarterback. We should have believed in Rodgers more, whatever. We don't need to go down the rabbit hole of the selection of Jordan Love. I just don't think that it was set in stone. Yeah, we're going to let him sit for 3 years or 2 years or whatever. And no matter what happens, hand him the keys. Because had they done that, they would have traded him last year because they could have easily said, well, the plan was to give Love 2 years and sit. So at any rate, Morley, anything before we finally transition to our primary topic for the evening?
No, just Jordan Love is going to be great.
We'll see. And that's the exciting part of the season. The off-season schedule did come out, so we'll get a little bit of glimpses on April 17th, and that is when the Packers off-season program starts. That is I don't know about a deadline, but I do kind of wonder if Gutekunst and company would rather have that whole Rodgers situation taken care of, just so they don't have to answer the questions anymore. Maybe they don't care. The draft is 10 days after that. I don't know, because I doubt that. I mean, Rodgers doesn't show up to offseason stuff anyway, so that's not that big of a deal on that end of things. But that's beside everything. We've spent too much time on this, 12 minutes to be exact. So I feel like that's appropriate. Let's transition into our topic for the night, Morley, and that is the tight end class. Green Bay, this is the least talented position the Packers have on the team. And yeah. I say that with all due respect to Josiah DeGuara and Tyler Davis. But DeGuara is not really a tight end, and Tyler Davis is a special teamer. Like DeGuara.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that is
And I do ascribe to the Tyler Brook theory of we need to start like breaking these up. So like Michael Mayer is a Y tight end, right? And other guys are F tight ends. And you got other guys that are like fullback H-backs. And that's what DeGuara is. It's like a fullback H-back. The Packers don't have a Y tight end or an F tight end. That's what I think. So Green Bay needs, I thought for sure they might be in the veteran market. To date, they have not been. The Dalton Schultz deal is a little frustrating just because I thought that was a perfect like pillow contract situation. And maybe they did reach out and he didn't want to come here. I don't know. But I feel like that's something Green Bay could have tried to figure out how to do. But they didn't. And we'll see. This is a very deep class. The good news for the Packers is this is a deep class. And I feel like they got 10 picks? They need to use 3 of them right now on tight ends at minimum. At least 2. And I think 1 like higher and 1 like mid-round. Like you can't wait until the 5th round and go, oops, we haven't picked any tight ends. So here's 2 shots on day 3. Like I don't think they can afford to do that either, because these guys that are coming in and coming to play on the team right now have the most direct path to playing time of anybody that's theoretically on this roster. So Morley, we don't have to get your opinion based on your eyes that you just gave me, but just the position on the roster, what it's like right now. And do you have any thought about like DeGuara? I mean, granted, DeGuara is not a tight end, like you just kind of said, but taking a step forward and kind of alleviating some of these concerns?
I mean, it's clear that DeGuara has a good rapport with Jordan Love. I mean, whenever they've been on the field together, that's been like, I think it's been like 70% of DeGuara's targets in his career. His biggest play of his career is that, just a simple screenplay that he took 70 yards to the house. But that shows you the ability that DeGuara has, just to be able to catch a ball and outrun an NFL defense for 70 yards it's not nothing, so I think his usage in this offense, I think we'll see more. What that looks like, I don't know. I really don't, because I think they're going to use him in some non-traditional ways. And like you're saying, like they need They need that traditional Y tight end that can be a mismatch. I mean, those guys, the thing about that, though, is that maybe outside of quarterback is one of the hardest positions to find because it is such a unique position that is different from college to the NFL. And one thing that has always stuck out to me with tight ends and trying to be able to project them. I mean, my rule of thumb has always been don't take one in the first round. We can get one on day 2 or 3. You bet on the traits. And for whatever reason, the Packers haven't really done that. I mean, the guys that we've seen them take, Jace wasn't a world beater as far as an athlete, and DeGuara isn't either. And he's not, he doesn't have the size or length. DeGuara's got really short arms. Like, I mean, so it's like they have not gone for like the toolsy type guy. In this year's class, you throw a rock and you hit one. I mean, they all
they're going to have to try really hard not to draft, like you mentioned, Jace, Josiah, guys like that. They're going to have to try really hard to find guys that aren't good athletes.
Look at
really good athletes.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 guys that are 8.3 or above, RAS score. And that's some draft classes you got like 3. So it'll be interesting. And then that's without seeing what Kincaid even tested as. Maybe, in some people's eyes, the best tight end in this class. We didn't get to see him test. I think everything you hear and when you watch his tape, I think he would have tested really well. And that's what I would like to see. And I think that's something that we can talk about too, Jacob, because there's different, it's kind of a, pick what flavor do you want in this tight end class. There are guys that, you can bring in, like, I know a lot of people really like the idea of Darnell Washington and, his upside and his potential as a blocker and pass catcher and all of that.
Hey, can I tell everybody a secret real fast?
Uh-huh.
I don't think the Packers are going to draft Darnell Washington.
Yeah, they brought him in, though. So I don't know. Maybe it was just because they've got questions about him.
I think that was a do your homework visit.
Maybe. And maybe they did their homework and he passed the test. That's the thing is, I don't know. But that's just the idea of him, though. Like, that's your Y tight end, right? Like, Michael Mayer is another Y tight end in this class. Those are probably your 2 best, traditional 2-way type tight ends in this group. Then you get outside of that and you get guys like, Dalton Kincaid is, I think someone mentioned him, compared him to like a little bit more juiced up Zach Ertz. And I like that a lot. Zach Ertz, really good football player, someone in his prime.
Zach Ertz.
Yeah. Would be a great addition to this, team and Jordan Love. Luke Musgrave is a guy that I've been high on for a long time. He is about the size of Darnell Washington and nearly as athletic as him. The thing is he doesn't block like Washington
he hasn't played
does.
Football.
And he also hasn't played that much. He's been hurt. He got hurt last year. He played the year before, but he has dealt with some stuff. But he is, you want to talk about tools, he's got them. And the thing I'll say too, it bugs me when people are like, he can't block. That tight end can't block. That's where you get into did they ask him to, or can he actually not do it? And I don't know if you guys know this, but like at the tight end position, that is something you can get better at. A great example of that, you were talking about Eagles tight ends. Talk to me about Dallas Goedert. That's all they said about him coming out of South Dakota State. Kid can't block, won't do it, can't do it. He's one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL right now. Mark Andrews played at Oklahoma in that wide open, spread offense. Oh, he can't block, won't block. He's one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL right now. So to me, it's more just, do you have the tools to do it? And Musgrave has the tools. I mean, the kid is 6'6", played at like 260, a freak of an athlete. He looks like a Greek god. You can teach this kid to block. I really think you can. And there are other guys that maybe you can't teach the block because, teach them to block because of their physical limitations. And like DeGuara would be a guy like that, that mold of a tight end, the kind of the 6'2", 6'3" guys, like Sam Laporta. He might not ever be a true wide tight end, but he might be a really good football player. And so to me, it's like, do you need to add two of them? Do you need to go add a guy that you think you can develop into kind of your two-way Y, split them out, keep them in line, be the safety blanket over the middle of the field, and then pair that with a guy that you think can be a little bit more explosive as a receiver, but you can still do some of that stuff with them. And it's fascinating to me what they are going to do. And this is a complete projection. I have no idea. I think our pal Dusty Evely is doing something on this, because the I don't know if it's a misconception. I've said it, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it seemed to me like Aaron Rodgers really just did not like throwing the ball in the middle of the field. Like, he is an outside hash quarterback. And for whatever reason, that's just the idea of him I have in my head. Does that change now with Jordan Love? Does that change with Matt LaFleur telling him, this is your primary read, this is where you're throwing the ball, and it's not up to you? You don't have the autonomy at the line of scrimmage that Aaron Rodgers had. Like, it is me drawing up the play, it is you executing the play, and there's nothing in between that, from the headset to the play call to the play, that can get that mixed up for good or bad. We talk about, Aaron Rodgers changed plays. He also changed plays and got them into stuff that they hit home runs on. So we can't just say it was always negative, because it certainly was not. But it's just, we're going to see a true, mirror image of what Matt LaFleur wants his offense to look like. And maybe
that's not a good thing. Like, that's the other part, is it could be a bad thing. Like, that's part of the intrigue for this season too, is I've said this before. I don't think Jordan Love just running the offense is this easy button fix all for everything. Like, Aaron Rodgers' ability to extend plays, do things differently, his autonomy at the line of scrimmage, those are things that we don't even talk about when the offense is humming. It's the same when it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 against the Dolphins, and the Packers drop a shot play to Christian Watson against the other team's third corner. Rodgers misses the throw by 10 yards. The problem isn't that he threw it deep, because the play it worked to perfection. He was open. Rodgers just didn't execute it. So that's kind of that part of it. But yeah, I think that I've often believed that we put way too much stock into schemes and coaching and all this other stuff, and think that every problem is just fixable by doing what this person says to do. Like, yes, there are teams like the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan is this, wizard that can get Brock Purdy to the NFC Championship game. They also have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and one of the better offensive lines in football, and Christian McCaffrey. Like, they got playmakers. Green Bay right now doesn't have that many. They have 2, Christian Watson and Aaron Jones, and that's it. Like, they have to add more, and that starts to me at this tight end position. Well, not starts, but the tight end position is one of them. So, Morley, you talked about a bunch of guys. I can tell you guys, while we're at it, and purchase the Green Bay draft guide, which is rolling across the bottom line here. Grab it for $8.99. I will tell you guys, tight end 1, and this is a collaborative effort, and I'm saying that because I do not have this guy as tight end 1. But tight end 1 in the Green Bay draft guide is Luke Musgrave. Is he? You just mentioned you really like him. Is Luke Musgrave your tight end 1?
Nope. No, he's not. He is in the guy. We've got some. It is weird because I feel like, the way we do the guide is it's not just one guy grading. It's
no, we do a point system, and then Kent Swanson is a dictator and takes everything. I just want to emphasize Kent Swanson is a dictator and takes everything, and whatever his rankings are, that's what happens.
Yep, pretty much.
Love you, Kent.
It's not actually what happens, but we all like Luke Musgrave like the same, and we're all like here with him. And then there's some of us that are like here with Dalton Kincaid, and some of us that are here, and it brought him down. So Luke Musgrave kind of just like snuck through the fire. He's like, I'm tight end 1. We all like him, and it was just kind of like one of those weird things. But I don't think he's not my tight end 1. I think Dalton Kincaid is the best tight end in this year's draft class. And you watch what he does on film, and I think he has he has gone under the rug and maybe even gotten to the point where I think he's underrated because he didn't get to test. But as far as just film goes, and again, this goes back to what do you want? Do you want a true receiving threat tight end? I think if Travis Kelce is the golden standard at tight end. And I'm not going to compare any of these guys to Travis Kelce, but Kincaid is the closest thing to that type of tight end where it's like, he might be able to block, but why? Like, that's kind of where Kelce's at in his career. Like, if you wanted Travis Kelce to sit in line and block 30 times a game, he'd probably be pretty good at it. And he has shown that he can block, but like, why? Why do you want to do that with him? And so, like, that's kind of where I'm at with Kincaid is I think he can be a really, really valuable asset in the passing game who will, block for you when you ask him to, and will do a fine job of that. If you need him to, chip or seal or, what have you in this outside zone, inside zone scheme that they kind of run in Green Bay. And I think to me, people talk about Mayer being a great fit for Green Bay, and I think he would be a good fit. I think he'd be a very fine player for them. But when you have a young quarterback and you have young skill players around him, like, to me, I'm swinging for the fences on these guys. I don't want to swing the bat for singles right now. And to me, that's what Mayer is he's a single. And
God, I don't agree at all. I do not.
You don't think Mayer is?
No.
You don't think what do you think he's a superstar in the making?
I think he's not a single. He's an extra base hit. Like,
I want a home run though. That's what I'm saying.
I understand that, but I think you can take a swing on a guy like that on day 3 and potentially find a guy like that as well. But with Mayer, I think Mayer has the best tape of any of these tight ends. And this idea that he's just this bumbling stump on the football field, I don't agree with that at all. He's an above average athlete, if not a really good one.
He's a really good athlete. No, he tested like in the 90th percentile.
Okay, so what are we even doing? Like, he's a really good.
He doesn't play like that. I don't think he plays like that.
Okay, I mean that's fine, but like, I feel like I think he's the one Green Bay is going to like the most. First of all, because I think he's the most
percentile.
Still, that's really good. And he came into the year as this guy that was being mocked in the top 15, and he still is to some degree, but this was a guy who was being mocked in the first round all the time. I feel like there's some prospect fatigue going on with Michael Mayer as well. He is my tight end 1. And I think it's him or Kincaid that are number 1. I don't think – I think anybody –
But they are. Yeah. And that's the point I'm getting at too is when I say swing for the fences, I don't care about blocking. Well, sure, that's fine. I'd be fine with that.
I do. I think you should care about
but that's my point is how much of a gap is there actually between Kincaid and Myers as blockers?
Mayer?
What I call Myers,
whatever, like Josh Myers, Michael Mayer.
No, not that guy.
There's a gap that's, I wouldn't say it's not a chasm, but it's somewhat significant.
Right. And so, like, my point is, I think there's a big enough gap as receivers that I would much rather have Kincaid.
The other worry I have with Kincaid is he's sitting out because of a back injury. And I've never met somebody that used to have a back injury. So that part is a little worrisome as well. But I mean, when it comes to this specifically, I'm kind of splitting hairs because I have Mayer 1, Kincaid 2. Where more my grading of the tight end class gets a little bit different is my number 3, and that is Sam Laporta from Iowa. And you want to talk about guys that are well-rounded. I think he's one of them. Chris, appreciate you stopping by. I'm not going to dignify your other response because that's not accurate, but that's okay. Anyways, Laporta, I think, is somebody who can make some plays after the catch, and he played in such a bad offense. Like, I just feel like once he gets out, sorry, Iowa Joe, but like once he gets out of that nepotistic offense with me playing quarterback, I feel like he's somebody that can flourish. And he's somebody that we know Green Bay has gone to see Iowa quite a bit. Now, that doesn't mean that they were there just to see Laporta. Iowa's got other prospects, obviously, Lucas Van Ness, other guys that they have throughout that entire program. But I think that Laporta is a guy who he can make plays after the ball is in his hands and was essentially asked to be the entire offense for a lot of his time at a lot of the passing offense, I should say, while he was at Iowa. and he's able to play in line and in the slot. I think he's somebody that could feasibly do both. That's another reason I like Mayer, is because I think he could play in line. Not that Kincaid can't, but I think he could be your slot runner as well. Maybe not as good as Kincaid on that end, but I think that has the possibility there. But I like him more than Darnell Washington. I like him more than Tucker Kraft. I certainly like him more than Luke Musgrave. Musgrave, I'm lower on. He's got the athleticism portion, which is cool. Some team will take a swing on him because of that. I just haven't seen it. And struggles with drops and contested catches. Those are two things that worry me. You mentioned that he wasn't a good blocker in college. I don't know if that's something he can get better at. Maybe he can. And he's got an injury history, which, I mean, that's not uncommon, but I'm lower on him than what I think a lot of Twitter is. And I'll be interested to see how the NFL does. One of my favorite things every year, I made a bold prediction today, Morley, and I don't know if you saw it. It wasn't related to the tight end class. It was related to the receivers. And my bold prediction was that Quentin Johnston, the receiver from TCU, is available when the Packers pick at 45, not at 15. Well, obviously at 15 as well, if he's available at 45. But my reasoning on that is that we both heard a couple of whispers that the NFL is not as high on QJ as Twitter is. And now that doesn't mean that he ends up, in the top 20 or something like that. That doesn't mean that he slips out of the first round. If Kansas City's desperate enough for a receiver because they don't really have any on the roster right now, maybe they grab one. But the point I'm getting at with that is, with the NFL not being as high on him, and Twitter thinks a lot, there's a lot of circles that think he's like wide receiver 1 or 2. Well, the NFL doesn't think that, or may not think that. I shouldn't speak in definitives.
So I've heard from two separate people, one saying like, draft Twitter's higher on this kid than the NFL is. And 2, I brought that up to another person that is more plugged in than we are. And he said, basically, the NFL loves his ability after the catch, but they are concerned about the ability to get the ball in his hands. And so basically, and you watch that TCU offense and that Sonny Dykes offense, and he doesn't run a very advanced route tree. There's nothing stopping him from being a really good route runner. That's the other thing. But I think he's he's further away than people think. And I think that's kind of where the NFL sees him. Like, he is a little bit of a project. What would scare me is if he ends up in like Kansas City, where they're going to use him in that Mecole Hardman role right away and just manufacture him touches while he develops. But not every team can do that. And that's the point there, right? Is not every team can just be like, all right, well, we'll just take him and let him develop, and we'll get him 5 touches a game and he's going to help us win. Like, not every team. And the Packers might not be that team. They might not be.
They feasibly could, but I mean, there's an argument for both.
It depends on what your development of Doubs and Watson is. And I don't know where they're at. They do. I would assume they are comfortable, or at least have an idea of where those two guys are going to be next year. But if you think that you can rely on Romeo and Watson, and then you can work Q in some of this, manufactured jet stuff, like, sure, like, I could see that being a ton of fun and being super effective. But I don't know. And I think, honestly, I know this is the tight end show, but we're kind of overlapping, talking about like, hey, that slot type option, is it a tight end or is it a wide receiver? It could be a tight end, could be a guy like Kincaid, or I think that's why people have such an affinity for Smith and Jigba, is because he is such a hi Sarah, that's my wife. He is such a slot type guy that is ready to play right now. So yeah, I know I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but slot guys.
Well, the point I was making off of it with Quentin Johnston was that Musgrave is a guy who I could see as someone the NFL not liking as much as the internet does. Now, that doesn't mean that's true. I can just see that being a possibility. But yeah, so my top 5 that I have it Mayer, Kincaid, Laporta, Washington, and then Tucker Kraft is my 5th guy. I got Musgrave right behind them. So, Morley, do you have your list in front of you? How does your top 5 shake?
My top 5 tight ends?
Yeah.
I certainly do have it in front of me. I've got Kincaid 1. I've got Mayer 2. I've got Musgrave 3. I've got Washington 4. And I have Tucker Kraft as my 5th, actually. Tucker Kraft very narrowly edging out Laporta for my 5th. I like Laporta a lot too. I know Joe is giving me crap, but I think he's a really good football player.
Yeah, and the reality of the situation is that if Green Bay ends up with any of these top 5 to 6 guys, you feel really good about it. Then you get into the second part of the draft, because again, Green Bay is going to add at least one of these guys, and I think probably 2 or 3. So
what have you watched Tucker Kraft? I know he's like a smaller school guy. I feel like he's the guy that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Like no one really talks about him very much.
It's interesting, and it could be because he's a small school guy. It could be because we're just kind of caught doing the Mayer Kincaid. Everybody in Packers land is in love with Darnell Washington, and that's okay. I understand from just an on-field standpoint. I kind of understand it, not fully, but I do understand the thought process behind that. But yeah, with Kraft, I mean, I think he's a good blocker. I think that's where it kind of starts there. And if you're able to do that, number one, it's going to be a good thing with the Packers. And I just think he has abilities to, make plays with the ball in the air. And like one thing that you've seen with Jordan Love is he's going to give his guys a chance to make a play, like with the ball in the air, or like the back shoulder throw in the preseason last year to Amari Rodgers. That's an example of like trying to get a guy to make an adjustment. I think Kraft has the ability to do that. He's not soft at the catch point. I think he makes plays through contact, and that's kind of why I ended up liking him more than Musgrave, as Musgrave had some issues with contested catches when he was in college. But I think that there's a few things that obviously he can learn on, and obviously with him being a South Dakota Stater, he's at a smaller school, so maybe they're not the most nuanced passing offense. And there'll be a learning curve because there always is once you come to the NFL. But I think he's really good. Like you said, I mean, if Green Bay took him 45th, I'd be like, yeah, I'm down. Like, sign me up for that kind of thing. The same is true with any of the guys that are before him, I think. I just think that the Packers, I'm not saying they got to pick one at 15. I honestly, I don't think that. Would you pick any of these guys at 15? Based on a normal simulation of the draft in your head. So 4 quarterbacks are going to go before, a couple tackle, just kind of go from there. But I can't picture a scenario to me where the tight end is one of the best players on the board.
I can't either, but I would get it. Like Kincaid and Mayer are both guys that were like, it would be kind of underwhelming, but I would get it. Kincaid. I think if Kincaid would have tested, I would have been fine with it, and so maybe I'm fine with that. But yeah, I guess my rumbling here is kind of answering the question altogether. No, I don't think I would. I wouldn't be thrilled about it.
No, and I mean, we'll be able to talk about some general draft strategy, but I just think with the Packers is over the last, 2 or 3, really since they lost to San Francisco in the NFC title game, Matt LaFleur's first season here, we've all kind of zeroed in on, like, here's one position. Green Bay needs to get this one position squared away in the first round, and they're good. And sometimes that's been receiver. A couple times that's been receiver. After they lost to Tampa, it was cornerback. And this year's Packers, that's just not true. Like, Green Bay has needs all over the place. And it's kind of a reset, retool type of year. If they win, that's awesome. But, like, the Packers, I think if you stuck truth serum into them, they would say, yeah, we're not winning a championship this year. Like, that's just not a realistic outcome for how the season's going to go, unless Jordan Love is just Mahomes from the second he starts on the field, which Mahomes is the outlier of outliers. So that just isn't very likely. So when I say all that, I say that, you got these people that, and the running joke, of course, is since draft day came out, so-and-so, no matter what. Well, a lot of people are going to say Jackson Smith-Njigba or Dalton Kincaid or, whoever their preferred pass catcher is. And Green Bay just isn't set up like that. Like we talked about it last week. They could pick an offensive tackle, and I think that would be a sound investment. They could pick a pass rusher. That would be a sound investment. And I think that's the areas, if you look at this draft, where Green Bay's picking, it certainly feels like to me that the best player available, in my opinion, is going to be an offensive tackle or a pass rusher. And that's not even with my skew towards line of scrimmage football players anyways. Like, I just can't picture a scenario where Green Bay is in a spot and the best player available is one of those tight ends or receivers or what have you. But I don't think I would take any of them at 15 either. If they traded back into like the 20s and picked up some capital and then that's what they ended up doing, then fine. If this Jets trade goes through and they end up with 13 and 15, I don't necessarily love this, but I do think teams use second first round picks as a luxury type selection. So I think Green Bay could 13, take your tackle, take your pass rusher, take whatever. And then at 15, take your tight end. I think that's something they could do as well. But we don't know what that's going to look like. And we've spent enough time talking about Rodgers' draft competition. Let's get into the second half of this draft because we talked about Kraft. And that's kind of where the break starts a little bit from if Kraft is 5 or 6 or whatever way you want to look at it. That's why we start getting into some of these day 3 guys. So Davis Allen from Clemson, Zach Kuntz, Will Mallory, Brenton Strange, Josh Weil, Luke Schoonmaker. Just what's that group or with that group? What's it look like to you, Morley? What's your flavor?
I mean, yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it drops off, but it's still a lot of guys that you really like Brenton Strange. I don't know if you just mentioned him, but the Penn State kid, I like him. A guy I just watched today because I'm getting into this deeper, a little bit more deeper dive on these guys and kind of getting some secondary grades on is the Miami kid, Will Mallory. He's a freak athlete too. And he's a guy that was productive at Miami. And I think in any normal year, he would be a guy that's getting pushed up into the top 75. But this year, it's just so deep. There's guys like him that are just out there. He's a good player, guy to keep an eye on. He's a fifth-year guy out of Miami. I think he had over 500 receiving yards last year. Josh Wiley from Cincinnati tested much better than I thought he would. Like him.
He's a guy that I've been convinced has been on the Packers' radar since DeGuara was there. I think Wiley was the guy who played in that college football playoff game. He just looks – I can't explain it. I know it doesn't make sense, but as I say this, you guys know what I'm saying when I say it. He looks like a Green Bay Packer.
Yep, 100%. Totally get that. I get vibes like that from receivers when I watch, 5, 6, 7, 8 games of these guys, and it's just this dude is the Packer. And they – kind of have been in the past, but another guy is we talked about Tucker Kraft, and someone gave me crap because he's a South Dakota State kid. That's fine. These South Dakota State guys, they're free agents right now. And if you're a Packer, I'll love you. But if you go to another team, I'll just continue hating you because you played for the Jackrabbits. But speaking of, the Missouri Valley, there's a North Dakota State kid, Noah Gindorf, that you talk about. Hey, the Packers have 4 7th-round draft picks. He is a guy at the tail end of the draft that I think he's huge. He is your inline blocker, and I think that is what he is at the next level. I don't think he offers much in the passing game, but he's a legit 6'6", 260-pound kid that played in an NFL style offense that asked him to run his face through people over and over again. And he did it. Yeah, he's been hurt the last couple of years, but I think if he can get right, he can get healthy. I think he could be a guy that has a nice little NFL career. And there's guys like that throughout this draft where you look at him, you're like, I could see a role for this kid. I could see him, fitting in, doing this or that. Like Davis Allen, the Clemson kid, same kind of story with him. He is big time RAS guy, but he was a red zone nightmare for teams. And that's just kind of where he made his money, was in the red zone for Clemson. I could see him being something like that for Green Bay, which, by the way, all this drama that we've had all off season the last several years, guess what? The Packers were atrocious in the red zone last year. Atrocious.
And not very good in 2021 either. No,
and so, that's kind of where you look at the tight end position and they say, well, can we get better there? Because you want, who are the biggest red zone threats in the NFL? Usually,
well, let me ask you this, Morley. What coincided with the Packers and having, quote, the gold zone in 2020? Who had a career high in touchdowns that season? Robert Tonyan. Big Bob Tonyan. Yeah. So I don't think that's coincidental. Yes, the Packers, and that's where, I wrote it a bunch because I did the how they fit for the tight ends for the Packers, and I wrote that a bunch. And I wrote that specifically about Davis Allen. Red zone threat, a guy that can get you a bucket in the end zone, so to speak. Can you find a way to do some stuff like that? And the Packers, yeah. I think that one thing, I'm not fixing their red zone offense tonight, but getting better at the tight end position is number one. And keeping Aaron Jones on the field, the fact that he doesn't get carries inside the 5-yard line is just a little crazy to me. But that's for them to figure out as we get there. I think you get to that group.
Did you talk about did you talk about the lottery ticket of all lottery tickets in this draft class?
I probably haven't.
Zach Kuntz.
Zach Kuntz. No, I didn't. I did not bring him up because I knew that we were going to do that eventually. Yeah, Penn State kid that transferred to Old Dominion, freakazoid athlete, freakazoid size. That is somebody who, like Green Bay, we get this idea in our head all the time where, I had a guy, I was like, I sent out a mock draft and I picked Sam Laporta at 45, for example. And I've got people being like, oh, I could get him at 78. Like, cool. Like, what? So then you get this idea in your head that they could get this guy in like the 6th round or something like that. That could be a guy Green Bay could take with their first 4th round pick this year, and I would be fine. Like, or similar, last year I remember an example was Jelani Woods. Like the 3rd round pick, everybody was just saying Jelani Woods is the 3rd round pick. And then there was some scuttle that like Green Bay might take him in the 2nd round, the day of the draft. And it was like, oh, I don't know. I would just wait on that and get him in the 3rd. It's like, you might not be able to. And it turns out they couldn't have. Jelani Woods ended up being a pick for the Colts earlier than what Green Bay's 3rd round pick would have been. But yeah, Zach Kuntz, Old Dominion, like I mentioned, transferred out of Penn State, and which is interesting just because then he was, in theory, good enough to have that. Obviously, he's huge, measured in 6'7", 255. That certainly pops right away. Can get in and out of his breaks pretty quickly. He's kind of a smoother athlete. He's got some work to do as far as like the my ball mentality. Lets too many balls kind of get into his chest. So it's instead of going to get the ball, which is something you definitely want in the red zone, something Tunyon was really good at, actually, was kind of like his ability to snatch the ball away from people. That's one guy. I think his ability as a blocker is something that could improve. He has those tools and traits like you were talking about to do that with time.
People talk about Kuntz as like this guy that has not played, right? And like, oh, his production is, it's not great. He only had 12 catches for 150 yards, yada, yada. I think he only played like 4 or 5 games last year. But you go back to his 2021 film, and he was an issue. I mean, this kid had over 70 catches, nearly 700 yards, a handful of touchdowns. So he's someone that the production is there. Like he did it at Old Dominion, but the production's there. And it always kills me with these smaller school guys that, people, well, he's doing it against, future car salesmen. He's doing it against insurance agents, like blah, blah, blah. And like to an extent, yeah. They are not as good of, they're not NFL caliber athletes. But guess what? The other team knows damn well who the best player on their team is. Mm-hmm. And these coaches at, FCS, D2, D3, NAIA, they know ball. They know what they're doing when they're trying to take these guys away. And they might not have the firepower to do it as far as athletes, but they have the scheme, and so these guys still have to go out there and do it. And, a guy like Kuntz, like that's what I'm getting at, is he went out and did it. He was not sneaking up on anyone at Old Dominion the big year that he had, and he still went out and did it. So, it's interesting. It's interesting and it's weird, but I think, the stuff about him not having played is a little bit overblown. I think if he would have had a similar year to like what he had, I think we'd be talking about him in a very different light.
Yeah, and that very well could. And we could be talking about him as like a top 64 kind of pick is what you're getting at when you say something like that. But yeah, he's a day 3 pick. And I think that is something that could play to Green Bay's advantage. He's kind of a nice little pairing with one of those guys we mentioned earlier. Is if you get one of those guys early and one of those guys late, and then maybe even a third guy. I think Green Bay could stand to take 2 or 3 guys in this class and kind of start developing them together, just because they've had, between keeping veterans rostered, not drafting well at the position, and just kind of struggling on the free agent market as well. With the tight end position in Green Bay has been a bit of a black hole. Their most productive free agent signing is Marcedes Lewis. With all due respect to Marcedes Lewis, not exactly a weapon in the passing game. So Green Bay needs a weapon in the passing game. They need guys who can block. They need guys who can play inline. They need guys who can play in the slot. They need guys to do a lot of different stuff for the team. They could even use a Josiah DeGuara replacement, because Josiah DeGuara is entering a contract year. Are they going to pay him? I sincerely doubt that. Now, granted, could Green Bay potentially get him back on the cheap? That very well could be. But there's a lot to go between now and then. I'm going to wrap with some homerism. And since Lambo Labo wanted to tell us that Penn State strength and conditioning is different, it is second in the Big Ten to the Big Ten champion Michigan Wolverines that smashed them in the second half last season. So their strength and conditioning program must not have been that good, but I digress. The shade will stop there. But Luke Schoonmaker. And the reason I like Schoonmaker is a couple different reasons. number one, he wore the winged helmet. That certainly helps. But even when you take that away, he plays in an offense that asked him to block and run routes. Like, they asked him to do everything. And Michigan asked a lot of their tight ends. If you guys think back to like the days of when Jim Harbaugh was the coach for the 49ers, think of the things they asked their tight ends to do. They asked their tight ends to do the same stuff at Michigan. Schoonmaker's able to do that. He reach blocks on defensive ends. He's able to climb to the second level. He makes plays up the seam, down the field. He had a very nice seam ball against Purdue, in the Big Ten championship game this past year. Makes plays off play action passing. He's a day 3 pick. He's an older guy. He's not this like freak show awesome athlete, but he's a good NFL athlete, and he's able to do a little bit of everything. I think that is a guy who, if you pick, and not only that, he went to Michigan, so he's got experience playing on special teams and stuff like that as well. So, and that's something they value very highly at that university. So combine all that together. I think that's a guy you get on the third day, and you are over the moon with that selection. Like, he's that guy that like, oh, we picked him in the 5th round and he's awesome. And he might get a second contract here, or he might get like a contract that's really big from someone else that wants him to be like their stud, because we have him along with like Michael Mayer, just for example, as somebody that they could draft and combine that way. But I love Schoonmaker. I think he's awesome. He's older. I think he's going to be 25 as a rookie or something like that. But with the COVID seasons and stuff like that, it's just hard to worry too terribly much about those things, just because some guys have stayed in college a little bit longer. Morley, you got any final thoughts as we wrap here?
Nope. Take 2 of them.
Take 2 and maybe 3, to be honest. With 4 7th-round picks, honestly, like if you get into that 7th round and there's somebody there, take another flyer on one. Like, honestly.
Yeah. Why not? Yep.
And you're going to have extra capital from this theoretical Aaron Rodgers trade, which should come back next week. I had a bit of a plug here that I did want to give. I got a bunch of different stuff that I'm trying to go through here, but I had somebody, True North Packers fan, ask, he found a spare $8.99, and if I have any suggestions on how I can spend it. Yes, that little line right down in there. Go ahead and grab you a Green Bay draft guide. Check it out. We have 225 profiles. The time to pre-order and get that price is running out. The book drops here very quickly. And the next time, Morley, that you and I do a show together, it's going to be in April. So April is also draft month. So that means we've got a couple different things. And yes, it's Joe's here. I'll let him say that. I was on Outback Packers with Joe. Check that out. We talk tight ends, so it'll sound a lot like this show. So maybe give it a couple days. But so you're not hearing the same thing over and over. But yeah, check them out. Do what you guys can on that. Next time we're here, we'll be talking pass rushers, my favorite episode of the year. Thank you guys for listening. See you next time.